I work full-time at a bank, and I'm very much in like a very similar spot. And like, what advice do you have for me?
Probably want to focus on doing small paintings because you learn more as a result of how many paintings you paint as opposed to how long you've been painting.
So one thing that drew me to you is I know you used to be a police officer and you
Yep.
worked full time, and then you made the transition to a full time artist. And so right now I work full time at a bank, and I'm very much in like a very similar spot. I've been working for a bank for over 18 years. I've been painting on the side, just like as a hobbyist. I hope to one day pursue it full time. But I just wanted to know, looking back now in your career, like what are the top three things you would focus on, and like what advice do you have for me?
Okay, that's actually a great question. I'm glad you didn't just ask for a single piece of advice because there are a few things there. So the one thing I would say is that what I found is that to be continually improving as an artist, you need to paint 3 times a week, because every time you don't paint, if you go like a week or 10 days without painting, you get rusty, and then you get your paints out again, and then it takes an hour or so to kind of get back to where you were the last time you were painting. And so it's better if you can paint like 3 times a week, even if it's only for a couple hours at a time. That's better than painting for 7 hours on a Saturday. Because if you just paint on the weekend for one big long stretch, then if you don't paint for a week, you'll kind of lose. It's like you just one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back. Whereas if you're painting every 2 or 3 days, you don't have time for the rust to build up. So you just keep getting better and better and better. And the one thing that I found that was really helpful there for me to be able to do that was to schedule my painting time first. So kind of look at my week and kind of figure out like which days are, can I paint. And I used to get home, sometimes I'd work in the 5 at night till 3 in the morning shift, and I'd get home 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd paint from 4 in the morning till 7 o'clock before I went to bed. Or if I was working in the afternoons, I'd paint in the morning. But rather than just going, okay, I'm gonna paint in my spare time and then try and make that work out, what ends up happening is spare time is like spare money. If you rely on saving just what you have in the bank at the end of the year, that's not nearly as effective as saving a certain amount every week and taking that off the top. So that's the one thing that I found is painting 3 times a week, you will improve much more quickly. And scheduling your painting time first and then scheduling your life around that painting time means you're going to be much more likely to hit those sessions 3 times a week. Now, I have to ask, are you okay if I ask some personal questions here? Like, are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have other people who are depending on you in your time other than work?
I have a 3 and a 1 year old. So,
Okay, it's tough, right?
yeah.
So then it means maybe like, and I know exactly what you're going through, because at my kids, well, when I was going through this, working full time and trying to paint, that was, well, I quit my job when Cameron, who's co-hosting this now and who's 32, when he was in grade 1 and my youngest was in JK. So they were the same age that yours are now when I was going through this process of trying to kind of pursue my art career part-time and not even really knowing where it was going, right? But I just knew that this is something I was really serious about, and I just knew that I wanted to fulfill my potential as an artist. So it gets tricky. Now, the good news is it gets easier, right? As they get older, in particular, once they're in school, it's like, oh, geez, I've got between 9 and noon every day to paint, and then between like 1 and 3. But as much as you can, I would do that. I would try to paint in smaller bites more often, as opposed to like having a 6 or 7 hour chunk on a Saturday. If that's all you have, that's all you have. But you will improve faster by painting more often in smaller time frames. I would also say, because your time is so limited right now too, you probably want to focus on doing small paintings, because you learn more as a result of how many paintings you paint as opposed to how long you've been painting. So it's like you could spend 3 months on a big 3 foot by 4 foot painting, but if you made some compositional errors at the start of that painting, then first of all, the painting's not going to turn out. Plus, you're only dealing with one composition out of that whole kind of long extended painting session. Whereas if you do 30 paintings over the course of 3 months, that's 30 different compositions, 30 different compositional plans, 30 different set of questions and things that you can do. You can be learning 30 different types of maybe stylistic approaches, subject matter, mediums, whatever. So painting in small paintings, in small kind of bites of time, I really recommend that. And do you understand the whole idea about process and product? Have you heard me talk about that?
Here and there.
Okay, so this is good. This is something we were going to get to at some point, so it's good to get it off right off the bat. That so there's three different modes that we paint in, and that's process, product, and practice. And product mode is what most people spend almost all of their time in, and that is basically trying to create the best painting possible based on your current set of skills, knowledge, conceptual knowledge, experience, all of that kind of thing. Putting all the stuff that you are competent and confident in, just relying on those things to do a painting. And if you do that, you should kind of come up with a consistent level of painting. Whatever your level of painting is, you should consistently hit that. But the problem is when you're in product mode is you never ever grow. And so you can spend 20 years of doing that and not get any better or grow at all. And if you go to any art festival, I used to participate in a lot of art festivals, and I used to still drop in occasionally. And I would see people who were, 20 years ago, they were producing kind of moderately competent, kind of little cutesy paintings that showed a little bit of skill, a little bit of appeal that, someone might spend $100 for. And 20 years later, their work hadn't moved at all because that's all they've done is they just stuck with that. Now we get into practice and process, which are really important. So practice, that's like if you were to take life drawing lessons, or if you were to keep a daily sketchbook where you're just drawing for 15 minutes a day, every day. It doesn't matter what you're drawing. It's just like doing push-ups, right? You're just doing the reps. There's no intent to produce a finished piece of art. You're just working on developing and honing the skills. And some things like drawing, we only get better by doing. I like the analogy of push-ups. You can read about push-ups, you can watch videos about push-ups, you can join a push-up support group, but if you don't get down and do the push-ups, you're never going to get any better at doing the push-ups. And so it's the same with practice. And that also comes into different techniques too, right? Like sometimes you don't necessarily want to be working on a painting. If you're kind of experimenting with dry brush, for example, for the first time, well, before going in and kind of getting a canvas out and going, okay, I'm going to do this in dry brush, it probably makes sense to get, those pads of canvas paper and just practice with your different brushes you have to see, okay, how much paint do I need to put in there and what kind of a mark does it leave on there? And you're just doing these little test swatches. There's not going to be any finished art come out of there. And so that's practice. That's important in terms of learning new skills, learning new techniques, that kind of thing. And then we get into process, which is the most important and the least understood thing by artists. So process mode is where you go, okay, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Maybe I'm going to try dry brush in an actual painting. Maybe I'm going to try to paint a little more abstractly. Maybe I'm going to try to paint looser. Maybe I'm going to try a new medium for the first time. And so you're doing something that you don't know how to do, that you don't have any experience with, and that you're obviously probably not very good at because you've never done it before. And what happens is artists step away from their comfort zone and they try something different. And predictably, oftentimes the painting doesn't turn out. And so it's a flop. And then you go, okay, well, that's happened, but I'm going to try something else again. And then they try something else kind of new and it doesn't turn out and it's a flop. And then what the overwhelming majority of artists do, because this is not fun, right? When this produces a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, right. We all have huge fear of failure and it feels like we failed at this. And it's like, well, why am I just going to keep doing this and failing? This doesn't feel good at all. So I'm going to go back to doing what I know how to do. And then that's how you get the artist that 20 years later, their work hasn't moved. So this is, if you only remember one thing from this entire Q&A session for everybody, this is it. Okay, I'm going to get to that most important thing in just a sec. But first, for those of you who are serious about becoming a successful artist and making either a part-time or full-time income from your art, you want to listen to this. So I have a playlist of over 60 videos, all focused on helping artists like you become successful artists and make a living from your work. So I've included that in the description. You can click on the link to that to see the entire playlist. Also, if you find my content helpful, and you want me to keep putting it out, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe, click on the like button and smash that bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. I try to put out a new video every week. And if you're interested in some free bonus training, there's also a link below where you can get 5 free chapters from my upcoming book, You Can Sell Your Art, as well as some amazing discounts on my courses. From my color and composition course, which normally sells for several $100s, you can get the entire bundle for $49. And you can learn more about my Hungry Artist community, where I do live weekly sessions with my students where I'll critique paintings, answer questions, and offer coaching advice. Okay, let's get back to the video. If you only remember one thing from this entire Q&A session for everybody, this is it. Process is also where breakthroughs happen. That's where you will create something. Maybe the painting itself is the best painting you've ever done, or maybe there'll be a little area in the painting where you just go, oh, I love what's happening there, and I know how I did that. Now I can bring that forward to the next painting. But in process mode, paintings are supposed to fail. And so what's really important is when you move from product mode into process mode is recognize the fact, okay, I'm in process mode now. I'm trying something I've never done before, and that is the goal. If I do that, I am successful. If this painting goes into the ditch and it turns out to be a dog's breakfast, it was still a successful exercise, because the whole idea in process mode is the purpose is to learn. And paintings are not just knowing about what to do, it's about knowing what not to do. And so when you do something that takes a painting into the ditch, you know next time, okay, I'm probably not going to do that. But what causes the stress in that is when our reality doesn't meet our expectations. And if you go into process mode thinking, wow, this is going to be the best thing I've ever done, and then it goes into the ditch, it's not going to feel good. You're going to feel like a failure. And so then you won't go back into process mode. And the whole idea of process mode is it's the trying of the new thing that is the goal. And if you do that, it's been a success, even if the painting fails. And so I would, at this stage, spend a lot of time in process mode. And one of the best ways, you could just randomly go, well, I'm just going to try whatever. One of the things that I found very helpful to me and some of the students that have gone on to really, really rapid successes, the best way I think to use process mode is to also seek out influences. So you want to look for artists, whether you do it on Instagram or through a great way to search out artists too, is just go to gallery websites, big galleries, and just scroll through their artists. And then when you see an artist's work that you go, we all know that feeling, right? When you see an artist's work and you just go, oh my God, I'd love that. And then the next thing you automatically say is, I would love to try painting something like that. And then that's what you should do, is try painting something like that. Depending on your level of experience for everyone out there, you might, if you don't have any idea how the artist actually might have created that look that they have, then you might want to Google the artist, see if they have YouTube videos or whatever, where you can actually see their process and try that. Or if you have a lot of experience with different techniques and mediums, then it's like, okay, well, let me see if I can figure out how I think that artist did that, and then try and do that. If your skill set and your experience is fairly high, then I would try and paint your own subject using that, what you think might be the process. If that seems like too far of a leap, there's nothing wrong with actually copying another artist's work, as long as you realize it's just a learning exercise. You're trying to learn the different techniques and just realizing there are copyright issues when you copy a painting of another artist. It's totally allowed under the fair use if it's just as a learning exercise or something you're doing for fun. And it's also a very accepted part of the academic process of learning art. If you go to the Louvre, you'll still see students in there doing copies of the old masters from the art academies in Paris. And so I would try and kind of bite-size chunks of painting, and more often I would work small, and I would spend a lot of time in process mode, trying different things, trying different techniques, trying different stylistic approaches. And then what happens is every once in a while, you might do that for like trying 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different kind of approaches or techniques or whatever. And then you just go, okay, now, there's an image I want to paint, and I think I could take a little bit from what I learned here and a little bit from what I learned there and a little bit from what I learned there. And you're going to put it together in your own way and then see how that works out. And then doing that kind of rinsing and repeating that whole process, that is what eventually leads to when you develop your own unique voice, which is the key. If you want to be able to make a living as your art, you need to be able to create great work with a unique voice. And by great work, it's who defines great work? It's the public. And when you're creating great work, again, I'm talking about in the world of commercial sales, which if you want to make a living from your art, that's where you need to be. And we identify great work, not by what any one person says or whatever. We identify great work by what it does. And great work stops people in their tracks. It takes their breath away. They can't help but say, oh my God, I love it. And they get out their wallets and ask you how much it is and they want to buy it. And so the whole idea that where you want to end up with is where you've created a unique voice that's very identifiable. When people see it, they know who did it, where you love the process, you love and are proud of the finished paintings, and enough of the public loves the finished work to be able to generate a living for you. And once you can do that, making a living from your art is actually relatively easy. Then it just becomes a question of how much you want to scale it. The problem is most artists are trying to make a living from their art and they haven't gotten there yet. They're producing work that the public likes. And the problem is there are hundreds of thousands of artists out there producing work that the public likes, And then they're going to go for the best value, which is the cheapest in that same caliber of work, which means the only way you can kind of make your work more attractive is to lower your price. And that's a race to the bottom that you don't want to be in, especially don't want to win. So does that help?